Hi, it's Dr. Scott. No hat this time. Got my book. I wanted to give one other follow-up lecture, mini lecture, after the symposium because many of you so correctly pointed out that it's a bit ironic that here's this all-men's drinking party to which women are not invited and slaves wait upon them, and etc. And it made my heart bleed because I had originally put the poet Sappho into the syllabus for week one, and then I decided it was going to be too overwhelming. And I have to admit that I've had a horrible time in the past trying to teach Sappho. And here's a few reasons why. Allow me to quote. Sappho lived on the island of Lesbos, from which we get the word lesbian, off the coast of what is now Turkey, at the end of the 7th and the beginning of the 6th centuries BC. That's 300 and more years before Plato and the Symposium. 300 years. Beyond these bare facts, we know very little about her poetry, hardly anything about her life, not much more about her society, nothing to speak about her character, and above all, nothing whatsoever about her appearance. As for the poetry itself, because Sappho's poetry survives only in fragments, tiny little snippets of poetry. We don't have one single whole Sappho poem. It's all haphazardly quoted, remembered, or literally dug up out of rubbish heaps and recovered. Here's what it looks like on one page. All right, there's the Greek, and that's the fragment. You see, it really is a fragment, right? Here's what it sounds like in a modern English translation, one little fragment. Love shakes my heart like wind rushing down on mountain oaks. But that's all there is. So what to make of that? Well, here's what the Greeks made of her. Hundreds of years later, that's what they thought she might have looked like, the founder of all Greek poetry. But even those fragments were written down hundreds of years after Sappho died. And then there's hundreds of years more of translations and retranslations and reimaginings of Sappho, all of which reflect much more completely on the times in which they were written than on anything that anybody knows about Sappho, because nobody knows anything about Sappho. So apologies to those of you who wanted to see more women in the Greek section of the course. You're right. You are more than invited to correspond with me more about Sappho. As you can see, I'm pretty obsessed. But I got to warn you, don't jump to conclusions, and be aware that what you're reading can be very difficult to read, very difficult to interpret, very difficult to understand, and has to be placed in these immense historical contexts to make much sense at all. See you online.